just change the thumbnail on this one later. All right. All right, so I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm going to go really quick. I want to make sure this is more on for you. I mean, it's more to feature you on there. Just I throw in some news just to get some things going. But let's try this going. So hopefully by the time I'm done with the news, we can get more people to join the live chat. All right, let's see here. Oh, I was already recording. Let me just get this going. Three, two, one.
Yeah. Hey, time to get it started. No delay. Let's work. Want to see you be an SEO expert. Paul Andre De Vera, steady dropping knowledge. Over 15 years in the game, so he knows all about it. Master the art of SEO. You will be amazed. Time to get your brand off page to on page. Dropping knowledge, legendary for sure. Whether you're just getting started, a self-employed entrepreneur. Yeah, let's go. Subscribe to the SEO Video Show.
Hey, what's up, guys? I had a little technical difficulties going on here. Hopefully this is fixed. I'm going to go really quickly so we can get to my special guest who has a very special treat for us later on at the very end. So let's get the show started.
This is Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. How did the SEO find their way back through the woods? Breadcrumbs.
My first piece of news is from our buddy John Mueller. He talks about HTTPS on the latest Google Webmasters channel. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Bueller. Not redirect from HTTP to HTTPS once your site has migrated. Is it okay to just move some pages to HTTPS, maybe my login page? Well, yes, technically that's possible. In practice, it's often not much more work to move the whole site over, and ultimately, that's what you want to do anyway. What kind of certificate should I get? Any certificate that's supported in a modern browser like Chrome is fine. You can get free certificate through Let's Encrypt, for example. How long does a migration take? Google has a lot of experience with HTTPS migrations, so if you have everything set up properly, it's usually processed in less than a week or so on most sites. In practice, the exact timing doesn't matter so much, since users will be redirected anyway. Will this migration affect my site's ranking? No, usually not. Generally speaking, it's still the same website embedded in the web in the same way. The ranking boost for HTTPS is quite small and generally not visible separately. Can I move back if something goes wrong? Yes, but it's not recommended. Instead of moving back, we recommend just fixing the issue and moving forward.
All right, there you have it. A little quick review on HTTPS and when you redirect to your domain. My next piece of news is from Marie Haynes. She talks about what MOZ actually did a test on the meta titles. Let's go and take a listen to see what they found.
Now, MOZ's Whiteboard Friday is a category on MOZ's page. And so they did an experiment where they actually removed the words Whiteboard Friday from each of their title tags. And so I guess the idea from MOZ was, well, you know what, let's save the title real estate, because the keywords in your title tag, we still do believe that this is a very strong signal for Google. And so they said, I think these words are just taking up wasted space. And they removed the words Whiteboard Friday, saw a 20% uplift in organic traffic to these pages. Now, then they went further and they tried removing the brand's name from the title tag. So from pages, they removed the word MOZ from the title tag. And so when they removed MOZ from the title tag, they actually saw a 4% loss in traffic that came from those URLs. Now, that's really interesting, and I think it's possible that it could be that they got less clicks because people didn't recognize this came from MOZ.
There you have it. test your meta titles. I mean, this is pretty interesting. I know a lot of us by default will put our brand name at the very, very end. I know I do in a lot of my websites. And it looks like it may actually produce less clicks for you just because of the brand recognition without having that brand in there. So pay attention to it. Do some A/B testing and test your meta titles. You can get some good stuff there. It is prime real estate, so make sure you use the right keywords. My next piece of news is something that is believe that a lot of people have been talking about. It's something where companies thinking about coming up with a new search engine. Let's see what our buddy over at Itamar has to say about it.
Much authority or whatever buzzword you want.
It's going to be launching its own search engine, most likely by the name of Apple Search. Now, this doesn't come as a surprise because in 2015, Apple launched the Apple Bot, which is the web crawler for products like Siri and Spotlight suggestions. There were new updates in a document that talk about Apple Bot and specifically about search ranking factors. So this is the document that was recently updated, and I'll leave a link in the description for this, and we can see how Apple is describing in terms of how to customize robots.txt and different indexing rules for Applebot. And the section towards the bottom is where it talks about the ranking factors of Apple search. So it says that it may take into account the following. So these are aggregated user engagement, relevancy, and matching of search terms to that content, the number and quality of links from other pages on the web, user location signals, and also web page design characteristics.
Are you ready for some Apple SEO? I hear a lot of people talking about it. There was a blog written by someone, I can't remember who, but a lot of people are talking about it. Something to pay attention to. It seems like Apple's actually putting out documentation for people to just follow, and they're making it pretty open, talking about engagement, talking about backlinks, that it's all part of the ranking algorithm. My next piece of news is something that we all learned something like new. I've been doing this SEO for quite some time now, and I still learn these new terms that we would think on something that we don't really, we know about, but we don't know what it's called. This one's called Barnacle SEO. It's something that I didn't know there was actually a term for it, but it's using other websites to help you rank for. I know a couple weeks ago, maybe it was actually last week, we actually talked about how my previous guest was able to rank a bunch of websites with other domains and other properties. Let's listen to my next video here by Lee. And let's see here.
Since Google says there's no such thing as domain authority, but obviously the industry uses that as a proxy. But what we find is that for a lot of folks, their own domains won't rank that well except for their own name, and so it's an uphill battle for that, and it takes time and investment. And so it's easier for content that sits outside their domain to rank than it is for content that's in their domain. And for that reason, it's sort of like a little bit like Barnacle SEO, but the idea is to dominate the search engine results page for all the concepts and themes and keyword combinations that you'd like to show up for as a company. And in some of those cases, your company is going to be one click away, right? So the person will find this article or find this mention or whatever it is, and that's going to be really effective, right? Because the more of the SERP you control, the more of the mind share you're going to get of the consumer.
Another term that I just learned about was something called Edge SEO. Our buddies over at the SEO Fight Club talked about something called Edge SEO, where they talk about how it's going to be pretty much the future of how SEO is implemented on websites. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
To Edge SEO. Because it's too much of a pain in the ass to work with engineers. And online retailers like to do website redesigns and rebrandings every 2 years, so it's a total nightmare. So odds are it's all going to be SEO'd from Tag Manager on the edge, and you won't need server access, and you won't need the cooperation of engineering teams.
Who has this edge technology? I've heard rumors about it. I've just never tried it myself.
Well, most people who are dabbling are using Cloudflare. And so the idea is you don't put the SEO in the source code of the web page. You create some instructions that get executed at render time of the page and SEO the page. So Cloudflare will get a request for a page, and the Edge SEO on Cloudflare will rewrite the title and tweak the headings and add some SEO text and make this other link no follow.
There you go, Edge SEO. It's a new term I've actually heard about. When I did a Google search, it's been around for quite some time, but this is something pretty interesting because I do have that challenge, especially in enterprise SEO, not just in e-commerce, but in like enterprise SEO. It's sometimes hard to get code put onto the websites on your web pages. So I'm looking forward to see how this pans out with Edge SEO. But SEO Fight Club was the first time I've actually seen my guests on a show. My special guest today is Steve. I want to go ahead and give you a quick introduction about Steve. Let me see here. Steve Toth has been doing SEO for over a decade. He was a full-time SEO manager at FreshBooks, but in February 2020, he took the company on as a client after ranking #1 for a 300,000 search keyword and quintupling organic traffic in under a year. His consulting company, SEO That Ranks, currently has clients that include Missouri, Format.com, FreshBooks, Uplead, BrainStation, Celtics, CarPages.ca, and more. As a former agency SEO employee, he also worked on brands including Porter Airlines, Toyota, KPMG, Intercom, and EMI. Steve is a go-giver and trusted resource to over 4,000 subscribers of the SEOnotebook.com, where he emails strategy notes weekly. Please welcome my guest, Steve Toth.
Thanks so much for that one. I love that.
Hold on. All right, Steve. So thank you very much. I had to make sure I played your little introduction along with my announcement of your name. You are the man, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for that intro. It's probably the best one yet. So way to go on that.
No, I mean, that's something where, I mean, like, you know, I wanted to make this fun and want to make sure, you know, you get the proper welcome here. I know, thank you again for your patience for the show. I know we started off with some technical difficulties. This is being recorded. So like, hopefully for those that had some questions or want to check you out here live can also see you. Right, we're going on live right now. I want to kind of go back to SEO Notebook. I actually first heard of SEO Notebook on SEO This Week's Clint's show on YouTube, and he mentioned something where the first time I heard about it was when you did like the best of like 2019. So how did like the SEO Notebook start out?
Honestly, like just reading and just having ideas like constantly for SEO. And needing a place to put everything. I'm not the most organized person, I would say. So, you know, prior to having SEO Notebook and just my Evernote, I would kind of, you know, even like Slack message myself something to try the next day, or put it in like Google Keep or like my phone's default notepad. And I just didn't have like a good place to like keep everything. Mm-hmm. So I just thought, like, I actually made a post on SEO Signals Lab Facebook group and just said, like, what do people do to keep organized with like all the different, you know, either tests or articles they read or comments that they read or whatever, like kind of information. And you know, I just decided after that I would try Evernote. And then like literally the next day I thought, hey, you know, it'd be cool if I just started making notes in here and emailing them out. And I checked the availability of the domain SEOnotebook.com. It was available. So I bought it that day. It was a premium domain, first one I've ever bought. And yeah, just decided to give it a stab.
So with the SEO Notebook, how'd you, I mean, were you just how'd you end up promoting it? Like it grew so big, 4,000 subscribers. That's huge. Like what was your main way of getting the word out there about the SEO Notebook?
Yeah, like, so it wasn't an overnight kind of thing. I had been really active in the Facebook SEO groups for probably 2-3 years prior to ever launching this. And just in my whole philosophy in life is like around just giving away knowledge, right? Like I'm not one of those SEOs who's super secretive about what they do. I've got an abundance mentality, and I've always just made a effort to help folks on those forums. And so people knew me there, and I had a good reputation. And then when it was time to actually launch the newsletter, a lot of people who already knew me jumped on board, and it kind of grew pretty quickly. And then, within right around a year, a little over a year, I crossed 4,000.
Nice. Okay, let's take it back a little bit. Let's go back to before the SEO notebook. And so how did you even actually get into SEO? Was this something that, you wanted to do growing up? I mean, this is something like how did you even stumble across SEO? I know it's something that was, just really came about maybe a little over 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I came into it from the sort of content writing angle. I was a copywriter at a web development agency, and they just knew at that time in 2010 that they wanted a blog, and they tasked me with creating content for the blog. And then I just ended up like messing around with getting us to rank for various keywords. And I just remember the first one I did was when to redo your website. and because we were a web development company, and we would happily redo people's websites. And I ended up getting on the #1 spot for that. I showed my boss. He was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And then just from there, I got a job at like specifically an SEO agency, and worked there for a number of years. And then skipped to another agency, and then ended up at FreshBooks in 2018.
Speaking of FreshBooks, I've actually heard a story of were you actually battling for the position with a friend of yours, or how'd that go?
Yeah. So a good buddy of mine was in the running, and I had actually been laid off from a job from an agency prior to joining FreshBooks. I was laid off, just it wasn't a good fit. And long story there, but just wasn't a good fit. And so I saw the job at FreshBooks, and it was like 10 minutes down the street from my house, 300-person company, kind of that like whole Silicon Valley type, like ping pong tables, food, and all this kind of stuff everywhere. And I thought like, wow, what a great job. And the only problem was my buddy was like a candidate for the position. And even though I was like out of a job, I didn't want to compete with him for that position. So, I just kind of asked him like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he got to the third round of interviews, and then he finally told me that he didn't get it. And then I was like, "Dude, it's okay if I apply." And he's like, "Just go for it." So then when I was sort of going through all those interviews, he kind of like coached me and told me like, "Okay, this is how this person's like," and like, you should just kind of like help me throughout the entire process. And then it was just a huge break for me to get into there.
I mean, that's really nice of you. I mean, you actually weren't in direct competition with him. You weren't interviewing at the same time he was, right? It was something where you actually like, you didn't get it, so can I give it a shot, right?
He was a former colleague of mine,
Okay,
and a good friend. So I didn't want to try to compete with him. Nice.
Great heart. I mean, speaking of FreshBooks, I talked about in my intro of you that you actually, I think I read it right. It's pretty small. Quintupled traffic. Is that what you did over there? Like what you do? What was like the strategy behind doing that? And like, I'm curious, what was the search term, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, well, there's many search terms for the big one. The other one was invoice template. That was our main keyword that we ranked for. I don't know where we exactly sit today, somewhere in top 3 probably. But the big influx of traffic was my boss basically had said, "I want to write 1,000 articles. I want you guys to like go and create 1,000 articles." And that was all he said. Like he just said, "Just give us that task," right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, how am I going to come up with 1,000 topics, right? And then like one day, just like a light bulb went off in my head and said, like, why don't we do just like all the people also ask questions for accounting, entrepreneurship, starting a business, that kind of stuff. So we just went like on a massive scraping spree to get as many of those people also ask questions as possible. And then just we categorized like questions that were closely linked together into one article, and we ended up writing 550. So we didn't quite get to 1,000, but we hired 5 writers for 3 months. They came into the building and like just all they did was write. And then when we finally launched that, within a year, the traffic just flew through the roof.
There you go, guys. Knowledge bomb right there. People always ask. That's something that you guys should always pay attention to. I'm curious. You said scrape. So how were you able to scrape all this? People always, also ask type of topics for your writers.
Yeah, well, now it's like really easy. There's a tool called SEO Minion, where you can just install that, and then there's just a thing where you can copy like the first 50 or even 100 people also ask questions. So just a tip on that. So if you're looking for a specific topic, just put in like what is blank, and then you should be able to get a long list of those people also ask questions. And then when you have that list, obviously some are going to be redundant, so try to group them together. And when we did that, we created jump links for each of those secondary questions, so those can get brought into the SERP underneath the title tag, and just make those pages more magnetic.
For those that don't understand, so what were like jump links? What are you talking about? On page type of?
Yeah, just like an anchor link. Yeah. So when you're on the page, like a table of contents, you click it, it brings you down to a certain section of the page. If you phrase that in the form of a question, if somebody Googles that question and you're maybe not optimized with your title tag for it, but you are with a jump link, Google may show a snippet that says jump to that specific section of the page.
Whoa, you're dropping bombs all day here, man. That's nice one. It's a good one over there. One other thing that you've also done, I think it was at FreshBooks. So you mentioned that you actually worked together with your paid search team to do some things where you come up with some strategy where you look into paid search to help with some SEO. Is that something you did at FreshBooks, or is that something? Okay.
Yeah, so we did we worked very closely. We had an awesome group, sort of disbanded now, but our team, we called ourselves the Dream Team. We always used to like communicate and share knowledge quite a lot, and just little things like what were the CTAs in the title tags, or what could we specifically include on our buttons for our call to actions on our pages. Before we were ranking really well with SEO, we didn't have the volume of data to do enough tests for that kind of stuff. So we relied on paid search, who was bidding heavily on that keyword and spending a lot of money on those invoice template keywords.
Mm-hmm. So you actually came up with something that you called keyword stretching. What can you explain to the audience, what's this keyword stretching that you talk about?
I didn't come up with it. I just I just gave it a name. I gave it a name because honestly, I didn't know what anybody would call it. Right. So it would just be like if you were if you were researching, let's say a long tail keyword, or even a keyword with 2 or 3 words in it, you can put an asterisk in between each word, and then Google will adapt its autocomplete auto suggestions, and give you potentially different keywords to target. So I think the one that I mentioned in my note was project manager interview questions. And if you put one before interview, you would get project manager behavioral interview questions. So it's just basically, instead of having the auto suggest only suggest the last word, it can also suggest words in between each of the keywords you put into Google.
Again, man, you're causing creators over here. That's so cool. I mean, I didn't even, I remember, like, I was like, oh, I never even knew about that. And it's like all these years, but that was such a cool tip. One thing I want to talk about is like, you came up with this one, like your most recent note in your notebooks, in SEO notebook, was this keyword trend like asset. It's like this nice worksheet and put together. I'm curious, like, how do you come up with that, like this idea? I mean, like, or is it just you just think about like, oh, you know, I think people can use this. Like, I'm curious, like, what's your thought of like putting out something so helpful like that? I mean, I'm sure you're helping like all 4,000 people. You're helping me with that. I thought was pretty cool. Like, so, like, what made you think of that?
Thanks. To be honest, a lot of the stuff just comes out of like personal necessity for the stuff that I create. And with that one, I really love sort of the increase of quality of the Keywords Everywhere tool, and now giving like 12 months trend data and stuff like that. And I was just thinking about how, like, you know, what would be a good way to kind of just like, because I was using it in with one of my clients in terms of looking at all their keywords and which ones were trending and all that kind of stuff. And then I remembered that tool, Keyword Shitter, and just tried it in there, and then realized that, yeah, I could just export all that and then create those little trend lines and stuff like that. So it just comes out of my own need for, you know, coming up with topics for my clients in an efficient way. And I have no problem sharing that kind of stuff. Another one that I really like that I use like in all of my stuff is a link tracking sheet. So I export all of the backlinks and anchor text in Ahrefs into 2 sheets. And then there's another sheet that for whichever links you're building or anchor text you're choosing, you can just put it in that sheet and it will tell you if you already have that backlink or if you already have that anchor text. So just things like that. If you subscribe to SEO Notebook, everybody who subscribes gets a spreadsheet bundle with 2 or 3 other spreadsheets in addition to those.
Nugget right there. There you guys go. I mean, SEOnotebook.com, sign up and get all these great assets. They're very helpful. I get them. I have to check out that backlink one. But again, I've been having fun with the keyword trending one. So I want to get back a little, take this back a little back to how you became an SEO and how you actually made the shift from being in-house to consulting. I mean, this is something I feel that almost every SEO possibly thinks about if they're working in-house. I mean, it's crossed my mind myself. I'm curious, like what made you jump? Like, what encouraged you to actually go ahead and pull the trigger to go ahead and just go full on consulting wise and just leaving that 9 to 5? You know, I'm pretty sure it's you know, SEOs get paid pretty well in enterprise. I mean, like, what made you, you know, what motivated you to go ahead and start your own consulting agency?
Well, I just love SEO, so doing it after hours wasn't like a huge problem, though. When, you know, having the lead up of sort of being a light freelancer to you've got almost a full-time business by the end, and like every spare hour that you have, that, you know, I reserved like 5 o'clock to 7:30 with my family, and then with my daughter and my wife. And then once she went to bed, my daughter, like, it was pretty much most nights doing SEO for my clients. And, you know, it was always just like sort of a dream of mine. Like, I've always been somebody who cannot get to work exactly on time. I'm always like 5 minutes late. I just like always wanted that like freedom to kind of do what I want. And then just the ability to kind of secure like a steady pipeline is something I think is the biggest barrier to any SEO venturing out, especially if they want to do client work versus affiliate. So just, you know, having the list at SEO Notebook grow really fast. And then also just I'm super active on LinkedIn. I'm actually taking a 2-week break as an experiment, but I'm very active on there, and just even switching my title to SEO at FreshBooks / freelance SEO consultant got me leads even without me doing much. So you might want to try that if that's something that you're thinking about.
Play with your LinkedIn titles. So it's just your title, right? Or was it your name that you changed? I think
just the headline underneath your name.
Headlines. There you go. Okay. So I want to take it to the part where I always ask all my SEO professionals I bring on here on like, the question is, if someone wants to get into the industry of how to become an SEO professional, like what are some things that you would tell them? I mean, I know you've also mentioned like, when you want to hire an SEO or something like that, you ask them like, hey, how does SEO change? I mean, on top of that, so like, I'm curious, like, what do you look for in SEO? I mean, what do you look? What's the question that you ask other SEOs of what people change, or how do you answer that? And what can you do to help others get into the industry of SEO?
Yeah, so if you're like not employed with anybody right now, and you want to get in, I would still say the best education is going into an agency, just because you're going to get to work on like a lot of different accounts. I loved the in-house experience at FreshBooks. I thought it was amazing to just have like one big account that you're just focused on every day and can work really hard and just get down to every last detail in terms of what you want to execute. But usually in-house companies don't hire fresh people like very often. Usually it's agencies who hire younger people. So I would just try to get a job at an agency, whether that's remote or near where you live. You'll probably get a whole lot of experience. You'll do tons of learning on the job. And yeah, that was my experience. By the time I was at the end of my first agency, I was a director there, and it was not like what you think of, like, an agency with 15 high level clients. It was 180 clients. And I was responsible for like sort of pushing people in a direction in terms of the strategy, and just saying, like, going in, like swooping in, like doing quick fixes, like delegating a lot. And and also just like the client meetings that I went through working at that agency with, obviously having to put out like fires, having that many clients, like I feel like nothing would faze me nowadays. Like, I know a lot of people think that being a client SEO sucks because you have to deal with meetings, but for me, it's like nothing phases me because I went through that experience.
Yeah, I mean that's great info there. I mean, so like for you, like how has SEO changed this year in 2020?
I think that what I'm sort of been thinking, and like why I'm shifting my direction in terms of like what I want to focus on for client work, is that I don't think that Google is necessarily going to make SEO more difficult. I think what's going to make it more difficult are large companies investing in SEO and smart content managers invading SERPs that you once dominated with like 8 or 10 companies on the SERP, or maybe even 5 or 6 companies on the SERP. And now there's like 1 company left and 9 info articles because those content managers from those large companies decided to write an informational article about that. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's what's going to make SEO more difficult, not so much Google. And that's the kind of clients I'm trying to focus on working with, are those clients that have that existing authority and can compete in a lot of those SERPs.
Got it. Okay, so we're coming close to the very end here. I want you to go ahead and give, how can people find you, and how can they get in contact with you? What's the best way to contact? And because I want them to see a special treat, if we can still get that later on right after you're done plugging.
Yeah, I don't know how special it is, but my best way to get to me is SEOnotebook.com and subscribe. If you get an email from me, you can always just respond right there and I'll write you back. Just give me like a day or two in some cases. The best other good places are LinkedIn, Steve Toth, Toth, just like it's there on the screen, and then Twitter, SEO_notebook. But I'm not as active there as I probably should be. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, guys. So I want to go ahead and wrap this up. And Steve, are you still okay with giving that little treat for everyone right after?
I'm okay. Yeah, I don't know. I can't. Like I said, I can't promise this too special, but I'll try.
All right. So while Steve gets set up, I want to make sure you guys go ahead and like and subscribe, and follow this channel. Again, we had a little technical difficulties, but I'm going to go ahead and pass the show on to Steve to sign us off. Let me get.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this and just say that this isn't really the type of music that I usually play, but I have this guitar in a weird tuning, so this is what I'm going to play. Ooh, that didn't sound good.